tell the audience about how you got started in real estate. I mean, your dad has obviously met Romney from Bain Capital and various other political things. So first question is, I guess, why didn't you just go work at Bain?
I never got a job offer. Let's start there. So I think my dad really expected all of his boys to go out and find their own path and their own way. I have one brother who did get into private equity. A couple of us are in real estate. One's a doctor. So we each found our own path, something we liked. And real estate was always really intriguing to me. So right out of college, went and worked for a real estate firm in Boston. I worked for them for a couple of years, and then ended up bouncing around a little bit, and then went to Harvard, got a master's in business there, and but I focused all my classes in real estate. I knew that I'd want to go back to it. So it was always a plan to get back to real estate.
What was the Harvard real estate MBA stuff? Was it mostly like institutional stuff, or were you talking to I remember you have a story about like a guy with a cowboy hat who just told you to buy land.
Yeah, no, there's only a few specific real estate classes at Harvard. Most of it was general administration. Harvard is really kind of a general business and entrepreneurship type school. But it played out pretty well. But yeah, and some of the real estate classes I had, we'd have really successful people come in and give us advice. And there was one guy from Texas who basically said, the one thing you can never go wrong with is buying land. Buy it with cash and hold it forever, and you get rich. And I wish I'd listened to him a little bit more closely, because looking back, the cash part and just buying everything you can buy in terms of land. So that's really the core business of what I've done is buy land, and it's been a big success for me. It's paid off pretty well.
I would, from what I know, I would also agree with you on that. So
land is good.
Did you learn most of the stuff about real estate like while you were working for those guys in Boston, or how'd you?
Yeah, I learned a lot in Boston. The best deal I ever had was the one I lost the most money on. So I learned the most from it. I bought a pretty big piece of real estate in 2007 with a whole bunch of debt on it, because I could quadruple my money in about 6 months. And that was the plan, and everything was going to plan until the great economic recession. And I was, the interesting thing is I'd bought it right, so I was still in the money, but the market was totally illiquid. There was no one buying, so you really couldn't sell it almost for any price. So I worked for a year and a half, just doing everything I could to convince someone to buy it, and I basically carved it up into some pretty small pieces. And offered a good enough price that, basically my basis, and was able to squeak my way out of it. But it took a year and a half of being completely stressed out, the bank, calling once a month, making sure everything was okay. And it certainly wasn't. And calling my loan due the day after, they basically called my loan due, and the day before they called it, I had the last piece paid off.
Oh, wow.
And I'm still mad at the guy who bought it, because he knew the situation I was in, and he knew I needed to have that cash. And then at the closing table said, I'm taking $100,000 off my offer. And I said, you already have like the best price. This is the best piece. I'm giving you the lowest price. He's like, well, I know you can't afford to not have me pay you, so I'm taking a discount.
It's like a tip.
So I still hate that guy. Still mad at him all these years later. Still really mad because so it kind of taught me, you can't ever show someone all your cards, because they will take advantage of you, which is too bad. I kind of feel like I'm more of an open guy and rather just tell people what's really going on, but he took advantage of me. So,
and was this like a ranch land deal, or was it?
Yeah, it was a ranch deal. It was, I regret. So I wish I just found a way to keep it, because it was one of the coolest ranches.
So
really cool deal.
Curious that I know basically nothing about ranch land other than like my grandpa bought some stuff for his sheep forever ago, and wasn't like the most. He just liked it because it was pretty. Really.
Yeah.
So what, like when you look at a ranch land deal, what are you looking at? Are you looking at it as like almost just big estates, or are you looking to sell to farmers, or like what's
Yeah,
the
and the
strategy?
ranch deals we do, I've done a whole bunch. They're really more, it's more of a hobby than the core business.
Yeah,
But somehow we've made a lot of money off of it.
it's a good hobby.
It's a pretty fun hobby. And in the meantime, you have, really beautiful properties you can go have fun on and hunt and fish and all sorts of stuff. So really the way we've done the best is we find ranches that are cattle, purely cattle operations. And they've been, they don't really see the vision beyond just being a cattle operation. And you go in there to tell you how many cows they can run on it. And that's the real focus. And you say, well, the first thing I'm going to do is get all these cows off and, uh, and improve the ground, improve the water. We love fishing properties. So if it's got water, running water, we'll do wetland habitat mitigation, all that kind of stuff to try and get the water up to good fisheries, and then improve the hunting habitat. And hunters and fishermen will pay a heck of a lot more for ground than farmers will. So that's what we kind of look for is stuff we can convert from farm ground into recreation ground, and that's been a huge success for us.
And is that all over Utah, or are you going like nationwide for this?
That's Wyoming, Montana, Utah,
Rocky Mountains.
Yeah, the Rocky Mountains. So the more I get into my career, the more I want to stay close to home. So I've had real estate all over the country, and at this point, I own very little outside of the state of Utah.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. So after, you had that, we'll say, bad land deal. I guess it ended up being okay, but
it was a good education, a really bad deal.
Those are the best. Those are my favorites.
I learned a lot.
Looking back, not in the moment. Those,
Yeah.
So this was like peak of the market or bottom of the market. You just started buying. I think I heard on a different episode that you were on 3,000 apartments with like an average purchase price of like $15,000 or something like that.
Yeah, it's actually probably lower than that. So I started buying. So I got my cash back, was kind of essentially starting over in the real estate game. And this is in 2008 and 9 kind of time frame. I started buying debt from banks. So, and the debt deals were really interesting. They were really quick closes and almost no due diligence. So it was kind of the Wild West, kind of everything you shouldn't do. But the prices were so ridiculous. And what we'd find, early on, we were paying about $5,000 for an apartment door. And there's, if you're not in the world's worst location, and you're going to make it, you're going to be okay at that price. The issue was you couldn't finance them, you couldn't get a loan, you couldn't do much. But what we'd found is we go out to these apartments, interview the property manager, who would say, they'd be at 20% occupancy or 15% occupancy or whatever it was. And you say, well, if I gave you, 10 rent-ready units, how quickly could you rent those 10? They'd say overnight. I have people come in every day looking for an apartment. It's like, well, why haven't you rented them? It's like, well, the owner's been taking all the money out, so I have no rent-ready units. And so we said, well, if you gave you 100 rent-ready units, how quickly could you rent it? They're like, probably a month. And so we brought out a crew from Utah. We drove them out to these apartments we'd buy. They'd spend 6 months fixing them up, and they'd live in one of the units and spend 6 months fixing them up. We'd lease it up to 95%, sell it, and then go to the next one. And we did it over and over. We built, we ended up having about 3,000 units that we put together, and probably an average, I think our average is closer to $10,000 a door. And so I really regret selling any of those, but it allowed me to kind of keep going and trading into other stuff. So we never kept the cash. We just always traded into something bigger and better.
Was that like, were you like, I'm going to go buy 3,000 apartments, or was it just
no?
Like,
we had
just
no idea.
Buy anything.
We were buying any. I bought a soccer bubble. We just started buying funny stuff. Anything that was like anything that these banks would sell at a huge discount, we'd buy. We bought a nursing home in New Haven, Connecticut that was pretty sweet. We thought it was actually right next to Yale. I was like, oh, this is awesome. And we went out there, and it's like, man, this didn't even do. Like they lost their license, and you couldn't get it back. So that was actually, we didn't really make any money on it, even though I think it was like a $10 million property we got for like $300,000. It's like, well, you can't lose on that. Turns out you can. There's always a way to lose money.
Turns out you can break even.
Yeah, so. we basically I think we made $50,000 on it or something at the end of the day. But it's we had fun. We bought anything, but apartments was really, really successful for us. I will say apartment management is really hard. It all sounds sexy until you get a call from the FBI saying we've we've been staking out your apartment complex, and did you know there's a prostitution and drug ring getting run out of one of your units? It's like, oh no,
No, I did
yeah,
not know
pretty
that.
awful. So you find out about that stuff, and it's when you have 3,000 units, there's always every night there's something crazy that happens, and every morning you come back and find out what happened, and it just becomes kind of a headache. So we eventually got out of the apartment game, mainly because I couldn't handle the management. I just didn't like the stress of it.
Yeah. I think after you've surpassed like a certain amount of apartments, I think the prostitution rings find you
Yeah,
at that point.
there's almost, yeah, it's unfortunate, but there's a lot of drugs and prostitution,
Mhm.
and we were not necessarily in class A
Yeah.
apartments. So we were in the class B minus.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense. So you said the ranch land and that type of stuff wasn't really the core business. What would you say the core business of the Romney Group is then?
So what we love is buying ground that's 10 years out from development. We get infrastructure in place. We work with municipalities to get the infrastructure in place. We get it entitled and wait for development to come to us. And we've really kind of tried to be 5 to 10 years out from development. And every time we do that, it turns out we're more like 2 to 3 years out from development. And things are growing so fast in Utah that people don't realize how fast stuff's going to come, including myself. And so we're getting, we'll buy the ground at a really, really great price. And the key for us is just getting things entitled and bringing the infrastructure, kind of figuring out all the problems. Every real estate deal we've ever done has hair on it. Like there's a lot of times you come in, it's like, well, this is going to be easy. We can buy it and flip it, and there's no issues. And there's always issues. There's always something to overcome. And we're good at it. I like problem solving. I like pivoting. I like changing our strategy. It keeps you on your toes, and it's been really successful for us. And we do a fair amount of construction and development, all that stuff. But quite honestly, I really just like the entitlement game. I like getting entitled and let someone else deal with the headache of actually going above ground. So everything kind of a dirt level down, I like doing. Everything that goes up kind of just becomes a nightmare for me.
So when you say you're putting in the infrastructure, are you doing the construction of that or just getting like the entitlements in place for the infrastructure to
We'll do both. So I mean, you get tax treatment a little differently. So if you don't put a shovel in the ground, you can kind of stay in that long-term capital gains category. So even though you might make a little more money, when you start moving some dirt around and put the underground in and put the asphalt in, you end up, becoming a developer and getting developer status and paying ordinary income. So the delta between long-term capital gains and ordinary income has been big enough that we've a lot of times just will do the entitlement and let someone else deal with the headache of doing all the work.
Yeah.
So, but sometimes that there's enough gain on the work that we'll do it. So we've got a couple big projects right now, doing a lot of it. We're spending a lot of money on not only doing the dirt work, but building water tanks and getting all that stuff going vertical with walls and building buildings.
I'm assuming you're talking about the Lakeview Business Park?
Lakeview is one of our bigger projects, yes. We've got almost 2,000 acres out in the Grantsville area, Grantsville-Tooele area.
You've been referred to the King of Grantsville, by the way. I don't know if you know that.
That's pretty awesome. That's pretty great. Grantsville is a really, really cool community. It's a beautiful place. And they were really struggling because their population almost all works outside of the city and outside of the county. So they come into Salt Lake or West Valley and they're working there. And as a result, their tax dollars are all leaving the county. And their school district and municipality were just getting hammered because they didn't have a tax base.
I remember you saying something, this isn't exactly correct, but like 80% of blue collar workers in Tooele County were commuting more than 20 minutes each way for jobs that pay less than $20 an hour, something like that.
Yeah, it's higher than that. So
Wow.
I think 85% of all people in Grantsville commute out of the valley. So almost everyone that lives in Grantsville is working outside of Grantsville.
And
so
when you got this, what was the evolution of this? Like, how did you find this piece?
This was another piece. This one, we saw that there was an interchange planned. UDOT was planning a new interchange off of I-80. We looked around. We're like, hey, this, it's someday, and the interchange was still 2 or 3 years away. It's like, well, someday, this could be a really good industrial spot. If that interchange, once it gets completed and you can get access to I-80. So we looked around for some ground. This is the piece that Larry Miller bought that surrounds his old racetrack out in Tooele. he bought it as a buffer. He bought it just simply so that no one would build houses near his racetrack. He didn't want anyone to come near his racetrack. So we bought that from Gail Miller, and then we bought another 900 acres or so from the Soil Conservation District out there. They're in the grazing business, and this wasn't the greatest grazing ground, so we bought that ground so they could go buy some grazing ground up in the mountains. So we ended up putting together a pretty big piece of property, but it didn't have utilities, didn't have sewer, water, power, any of that stuff. So it's taken us a few years to get all that infrastructure put in, but we're built. I don't know. We're probably built almost 1 million square feet of office out there so far.
So it's office, industrial. Is it?
So did I say office? I meant industrial.
Oh, I was like, I didn't know there were
no
office
office
buildings out there.
No office,
Okay.
Just industrial.
And you just saw this and kind of same thesis, like, oh, this will be good someday, but like,
yeah, this was it was basically
what year was
the
this, by the
price?
way?
Oh man, when did we buy this? It's been probably 5 years. We bought this about 5 years ago. The price we paid, it just, again, you really can't go wrong. And you buy ground at agriculture prices, and you think it's going to be at some point something else besides agriculture, you're going to make money. So we bought it, at an agricultural price. And we waited for development to come to us. So, and it really has. And the demand for industrial space has been pretty solid, even though things are kind of turning a little bit right now in the market, especially on the commercial side. We're still seeing a huge demand on the industrial side.
And you partnered, was it North Point? Is that the group that?
Yeah, so we partnered our first building with North Point. They were good partners. We just, we had a different vision for what the park was going to be. And so we mutually agreed that, going forward, we kind of just, we were doing different stuff than they wanted to do. And so we decided to go just on our own without North Point. We didn't, we knew we could do it on our own without them. And then we, started developing. We were actually approached by Prologis.
Oh.
So Prologis came to us about, 18 months ago and said, hey, we don't have a site in Utah, and this happens to be our favorite site in the state. So would you guys be willing to partner with us? If we brought users in on a build-to-suit basis, would you be willing to come build some buildings with us and throw in your ground? So we're currently partnered with Prologis. We talk to them, almost every day on deals that they're bringing to us or we're bringing to them. And it's that's been a really great partnership. So Prologis, is the largest industrial developer, and
by a little bit.
Yeah, by a lot. Yeah. So I think they estimated that 1 out of 3 Christmas packages this year in the world went through one of their facilities. So they're pretty big.
I've heard that I think it's like 2% of the country's GDP flows through a Prologis building.
I think
at one point.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, they are not small. So, and they're great partners. They've been really fun to work with, and they've brought a lot of activity to our site.
So what is your role then now? Is it just like you're the kind of controlling player and Prologis does all the work, or like?
No, we're still the master developer on it. We're controlling it. They, if they find a deal that they think fits, they'll come to us, and we look at either selling them our ground, doing a JV with them, or just kind of figure out what makes the most sense for them and for us. But we just are their preferred location in the state of Utah.
It's a good relationship.
It's a great relationship to have, and they really are, in terms of just being solid, good people. They've been fantastic to work with.
And so you have Lakeview Business Park, huge project. You have some other projects in the works. What else do you have going on these days?
We've got a lot. So we've got a pretty big residential development down at Sand Hollow, right in Hurricane, Utah.
Yep.
That's about, I think we're entitled for almost 4,000 residential units there. So that's a real big one. Yeah, it's a real big one. We won't build that many, but it's right around Sand Hollow Reservoir. Again, we're dealing with utilities on that, trying to figure out the utility issue and making sure we have the water and power we need. It's taken a few years to work with the city to get all that done, but we're kind of nearing the end of that. So we feel pretty good. We've got a couple other big residential developments, another one in Grantsville, and then projects kind of up and down the Wasatch Front, big and small.
Yeah.
So, but mostly land deals. I love owning land, and just the nice thing is you can sit on it for a long time and see what happens.
Yeah.
So sometimes you don't know what to do, so you just wait a couple of years and you figure it out.
I tell people that I like to do complicated deals, just because those are the ones that you make money on. I kind of do more infill stuff, but the stuff that you do is just very, very complicated, entitlement work and infrastructure wise. I want to talk about your hideout property. That one
Yeah.
is I think, as complicated as it can get.
Yeah, Hideout's a tough one. Hideout's a tough one. So that's a deal right out on I-40 in Park City, actually in Summit County, not in Park City proper. And it's a beautiful property. It's got some wetland issues and some entitlement issues, but it was fun. We went and met with Park City. They loved it. They loved the piece. We actually brought in some density to them and showed them what we wanted to do, kind of make a really cool retail residential development. And their city planner said, we like it, but we don't think you have enough density or enough retail. This is one of our 4 nodes for the city that we really want to get entitled. And so we got really excited and thought, all right, this is going to be great. We went into city council, and basically they said it was the worst thing they'd ever seen, and get the bleep out of their office.
Yeah.
So we kind of, our heads were spinning. We're like, and the city planners didn't back us up at all.
Oh, that helps.
And then, we kind of kept moving forward because we had entitlement on it. We had some issues, and we kept moving forward, and they gave us they basically gave us a big no. So we went to the municipality next door, which is Hideout, said, hey, do you guys want our property in Hideout? And they were more than excited to have us be part of their community. And so we subsequently got sued by Park City.
Oh, nice.
Anyway, so it's been, I don't know how much I'm supposed to talk about it or not.
We'll clear it with your lawyer before we.
Yeah, the nice thing. So we had, we did have the Miller family come in. They've got a great relationship with Park City and bought us out of that deal. So, so at this point, I'm actually free and clear of the Hideout deal. The Millers bought us out, and so that deal was fun. But I just, in terms of opportunities, life is pretty short, and real estate's fun, just not in Park City under any scenario ever. We really don't want to ever develop in a community that's so developer. They have so much hatred for developers. It makes life not that fun to work with them. So it's kind of one of my life mottos is not to develop in a place that hates you that much. And you go to another place like Grantsville, and they want to work with you. They know they need it. This is a huge economic boom for the city, huge tax base for the city. They want to make life easier for you. Obviously you got to follow the rules and meet all regulations, but it's like they want to work with you. We're Park City. They say, hey, we want affordable housing. What can you do to bring us affordable housing? It's like, well, here's a affordable housing project. What do you think? Well, it looks a little too close to the city. Well, are these going to be small houses? Well, what kind of people are going to live there? I don't think we're up for that. So you just really don't want to be in a city that is anti everything.
Yeah, that makes sense. So alongside your numerous real estate ventures, you bought a mortgage company called Intercap.
Yeah.
Big fan of Intercap, of course.
Intercap's great company.
How did that happen?
That actually happened, funny enough, through a ranch deal. So I sold a guy a ranch. He collateralized it with his mortgage company. So when he didn't pay me out, I actually extended the deal. Said, hey, I'm not going to foreclose on your company, but let's look at some opportunities and different things. And we got to know each other pretty well. He and I actually became pretty close friends. And he found another company that was not his own. So he owned one mortgage company. Intercap was a separate company that was for sale that he kind of educated me on and said, hey, I think this is an incredible opportunity. You ought to buy it. I did buy it. He was going to actually be the president of the company and help me run it. But he tragically passed away. And so I ended up with this company, a mortgage company, which I did not know how to run. So I didn't know the first thing about mortgage.
I want to talk about this, like how it feels like you just buy stuff for fun. Like it's all just a big game.
Yeah. Every once in a while that happens. Yeah.
So like, obviously hard to run a mortgage company when you don't know that much about mortgages.
Yeah.
So like, walk me through that process of buying it and trying to figure out what you were doing.
Well, number one, I like to surround myself with people who are smarter than me. So that was step one, is I got to find a few people who do know how to run a mortgage company and see if I can convince them to work for me. And so that was really the first 6 months or even year. I hired some really, really top talent, convinced them that I was, in this for the long run, that we were going to become the biggest lender in the state of Utah.
Which you did.
Which
right?
we did.
Yeah.
We did. But, that had I known how hard that was going to be, I wouldn't have promised that, but it seemed like it'd be easy.
Yeah, of course.
But, and then I there was a couple people that I shouldn't have been able to hire that somehow, just came over and worked with me, and it's been really successful. I think everyone that trusted me is, I think been really heavily and handsomely rewarded and done really well. So it was a great run, but we sometimes it's good to know everything about a business, and sometimes it's good to come in and just break everything. And we kind of there's a lot of things that were done in the mortgage space because it's just the way it's always been done, and that was our thing from the beginning is we were not going to do things because that's the way it's always been done. If it didn't have to be done or it wasn't in a rule book somewhere, we were going to do it differently and faster and cheaper and more efficiently. And we compare ourselves regularly to our peers, and we consistently do it faster and cheaper and better than anyone else in the market. And I think it is because we came in from the outside. We looked at mortgages differently, and we kind of broke the mold on how we do it. But it's allowed us to do it really efficiently and really well.
Do you often look at like private equity deals in that capacity, or is it just?
It's really rare. And the more I've done it, the less I want to. So real estate is so simple and easy.
Yeah.
And it's, you buy a piece of dirt and it gets complicated. I mean, it's never easy. But compared to private equity and having all these employees, I mean, I think Intercap, we've got about 400 employees right now, which is great. I love them. They're incredible people, but it's just a lot of work and a lot of stress and figuring things out and a big payroll. And I do love Intercap. And the nice thing is I've got a really good executive team that runs the day to day. So
Yep.
I'm not there every day, but I do definitely keep an eye on what's happening. But the real estate I love real estate. I love the creativity that goes behind it. I love how simple it is and how, you can really make something beautiful and interesting and different and provide opportunity for so many people.
Mm-hmm. And I met your brother, it's Matt that runs Sundance, right?
Yeah, Matt.
I met him last year, and one thing that he said is Matt's kind of always been a specialist. Like they've always just done apartments or just done the debt fund. But you've kind of have you done every asset class?
Yeah, I've done hospitality, but just about everything else.
Best.
Yeah, just about everything else. And I think hospitality is, as much an operations business as it is real estate.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's pure real estate, yeah, I've probably done everything. And we've pivoted a lot. Like we were really heavy in multifamily. And then 5 years ago, I thought multifamily was going to get hammered. I was wrong. I mean, multifamily has done really well for the last 5 years. But I got out of it. I just thought, man, it seems like it's just kind of oversaturated. And I thought with rates going down as low as they would, that people would be leaving apartments and going into homes. And that happened to some degree, but apartments obviously exploded and did really well. But I do think today, I think apartments are in trouble, and maybe I'm 5 years early again, but it does seem like there's some issues with, particularly if you've taken out a lot of debt. Like if you maxed out your debt on your apartment portfolio and you're maxed out, and now you got to go refinance, and the costs are going up a lot faster than the rents are, that you're going to be in trouble. I mean, I've seen a lot of apartment pro formas that have costs or the revenues going up at 4% and costs going up at 3%.
Yeah,
and they always have that. And it makes the pro formas look really good when your revenues are growing fast and your expenses. You bring it out 20 years, it's like, look how much money we made. It's like, oh, that's really exciting. But put those numbers the same or put expenses higher, which is where we are now. I think expenses are going to be rising. If you think about property tax, you think about insurance, you think about all these different things, the wages, utilities that are just exploding, and revenues on the revenue side. So the rent is either flat and in some cases coming down. That destroys a lot of pro formas. And then you add into that the rent or the debt expense that,
not fun.
That triples or, doubles or triples or quadruples, depending on where your rates were. That's the deal killer. So I think there's going to be a lot of people that are underwater because their pro formas were
not good.
Were not great.
Yeah.
We joke about that, but you can make a lot of money on paper real easy, and you can make pro forma look really, really good by just mixing one or two numbers up. And so I try not to actually look too heavily at really big, complicated pro formas. I like putting everything on one page, just saying, can I double my money in a couple of years? And if not, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
So that's kind of it. And, I think the more complicated the pro forma gets, the more the more variables are in there, the more things can kind of go wrong, and you can convince yourself it's a phenomenal deal when it's not.
Yep, exactly. So did you ever feel like you needed to specialize in any capacity, or were you just
I never wanted to because I feel like I like pivoting. So we pivoted from multifamily 5 years ago into industrial. And even though multifamily has done really well in the last 5 years, it hasn't, in my opinion, done as well as industrial. I think industrials, we really hit a pretty big home run on that and continue to do well. Even though the market's slowing, we're not building spec buildings like we once were. We're still building just build to suit, but the build to suit market's really good. I think people haven't for the last 2 years wanted to build their own buildings. They've been kind of quiet and holding off, but now everyone knows that they've got to expand. They've got huge business demands, and so they're now building buildings. And so we're seeing that come in. We've got a lot of users either buying or circling or about to buy at our property out there.
Are they mostly manufacturers that are in the market, or is it manufacturing,
we get a little of everything. So we're kind of, I kind of feel like we're probably half manufacturing, half distribution right now.
Mm-hmm.
So
cool.
It's pretty good though.
Where do you see yourself in the future doing more land deals, less land deals,
it's funny. Every time I get a 1031, and we look at buildings I could buy and different things. It's like, I don't get that excited about buying buildings. I like buying land. Mm-hmm. So we kind of keep 1031ing into land and just buying more. And I think we've bought, the thing with land is that they're not making more of it. And if you buy it in the right location and you have some sense of where infrastructure and utilities are coming, you can do really, really well. But, if you buy somewhere where there's never going to be infrastructure or land or roads, then, you're in a lot of trouble. But if you kind of know where infrastructure is coming or think you know where it's coming, even if it's 5 or 10 years out, you're going to do pretty well.
And you're obviously a very busy guy with all the real estate projects, the largest mortgage company on the planet. And you also
I wish. Yeah.
Sorry, not on the planet, in the planet.
Just Utah.
Yeah. And you also have 7 kids?
I have 8 kids.
8 kids.
Yeah.
So
youngest is 4, oldest is 21.
Do you ever sleep?
I sleep pretty good. Yeah, I sleep pretty good. I wake up early. I wake up at 4:30 or 5 most mornings, so to be able to get something done.
Yeah.
Before everyone wakes up and starts bugging you. But yeah, the kids are a lot of fun. 8's probably a little crazy, but it's been the greatest experience of my life is raising those kids. There's nothing else that's been as fun as having kids.
Yeah. You do the economic forecasts that I think I've heard other realtors regurgitate in some capacity.
Yeah.
Every couple months. Where do you think we are on the housing market?
It really depends. I tend to think we're in a pretty stable housing price market. Like, I think we're okay. I think there's going to be enough people that just don't sell their homes because they're locked into that 3% mortgage that we're not going to see a huge influx of inventory that would cause prices to drop. But if rates stay this high forever, and kind of keep going forward, I think prices are unsustainably high with rates this high, and not that many people can afford it. So I can see prices maybe coming down a bit. I could see them going up a bit, but I don't see a massive swing one way or the other. Like, I don't see a huge swing up because it's already so expensive, and I don't see a huge swing down just because inventory, I don't think, is going to be there.
Yeah.
Now that could change. But, and things that would change it, I think if the Fed got really aggressive on lowering interest rates, we could see housing start picking up again.
You think they will?
I think they will if unemployment really starts ticking up. And that's the thing I think a lot of people aren't looking as closely at, is unemployment. And the unemployment numbers the job openings are coming down pretty quickly. They're still way too high, but they're coming down pretty quickly. The big issue we have is that our federal government is just spending way too much money. So that's the real issue. And the Fed is trying everything they can to lower inflation by, raising interest rates, and they can only do so much. Obviously, they're doing as much as they can, and it's not working. It's worked to a degree, obviously. We were at 10% inflation, and now we're at 3.5, somewhere in there. But the problem is you have federal government spending about $2 trillion extra a year on their credit card, essentially. And when you're doing that, you're gonna create inflation. Mm-hmm. And President Biden had his Inflation Reduction Act of $1.5 trillion Inflation Reduction Act, which is probably one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. And obviously drove inflation up. Had he not done that, we might be at 2% right now. And if the federal government, instead of spending $2 trillion, we're spending $1 or $500 billion a year, I think inflation would be pretty low. So, but Jerome Powell's doing everything he can by raising interest rates to bring down inflation. I just don't. That's the only tool he has, and I don't think it's the most effective tool. The most effective tool would be the federal government stop spending money. So that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll have high interest rates for a while to combat the government spending, and I don't know. I don't know if that's going to win out or that's not going to win out. Which one of those? So you kind of have one foot on the gas, one foot on the brake, and which one's going to win? And it'll play out a little bit. But I don't see the federal government pulling back how much money they're spending. In fact, they'll keep spending more. We'll spend as much in interest this year as we do on the federal on the entire defense budget. So if you're spending as much on interest as you are on defense, that expense is going to be there every year from here on out. So we got to borrow money to pay our interest, and that's going to keep growing and growing and growing. So until we get a president that is serious about holding Congress's feet to the fire and telling them they got to cut spending, which neither one of our presidential candidates is going to do right now. So we're at least 4 years away from having a president who's going to tackle the budget. We're going to keep spending a lot of money.
Yeah, it makes life tough. But
so it's going to keep rates high. And unless, counter to that is if you see unemployment really skyrocket, and that would drive wages down, and it would cause Jerome Powell to start lowering rates. So that could happen. And I kind of think we're getting close to that happening. It feels like a lot of the economic data I'm looking at, it's not going to happen next month, but it might in 6 months. 6 months we really might, 4 to 6 months, we might see unemployment really start to tick up, and that would not be a good thing for people losing their jobs, but it would probably be a good thing for the economy because we're a little overheated right now.
Yep. We'll have to get you on a separate time just for you to do your economic forecast. Anytime. Just right in front of me.
Anytime.
Cool. This has been great.
Thanks, Tanner. Appreciate it.